Welcome to Life, Biz and All That Jazz, the podcast where real talk meets transformation. If you're navigating mental health, healing from trauma, or just trying to build a life that actually feels like yours, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Jasmine Lisciotto, and every week we bring you the messy, the beautiful, the empowering, and the transformations. So if you're new here, welcome along for the ride. If you've come back for more, thank you for trusting in my vision and coming back for more. Just need to give you a little reminder that this podcast may include conversations that are sensitive or emotionally triggering to some people. Please prioritize your mental health first and take breaks. Check the show notes for more details. Today's episode is for anyone that's standing at a crossroads, questioning their identity, struggling with purpose, or silently navigating shadows of depression, burnout, or disconnection. Today, I'm joined by the incredible John Templeton, a life coach with over a decade of experience helping people master all 7 areas of life, from physical health to emotional well-being, mindset, relationships, and purpose. John's background is stacked. He's ex-Army, Special Forces physical instructor, Guinness World Record holder, we chat about it in the episode, national champion, strategic investor, and he's trained Olympian athletes, professionals, and celebrities. John has spoken alongside icons like Tony Robbins, Mel Robbins, Robin Sharma, and Dr. John DeMartini. And he now leads transformational programs, events, and coaching across the globe. But behind all of this, John's story is one of complete collapse and powerful rebirth. In his mid-20s, despite having the body, the money, and the status, one relationship unraveled everything. Within 3 short years, John had lost it all, including his sense of self and almost his life. What followed was years of darkness, depression, anxiety, panic attacks. That descent eventually sparked a new path for John, one that led him through philosophy, psychology, theology, and deep contemplation. And from that, he rebuilt his life and created transformational frameworks that now help people all around the world. So I can't wait any longer. I'm so excited for you to hear from John. Let's dive into today's episode. Welcome, John, to Life, Biz, and All That Jazz.
Thank you for having me.
The pleasure's all mine. I really, really appreciate your time. So we've got a lot of topics I want to cover today because I see you are a wealth of knowledge. You're not only been there and, been through your own transformation, you're able to share it all now. And one thing I wanted to start off, though, when I looked at your website, which I think is quite fun, is Guinness World Record holder.
Yeah, that's everybody asked the same question. What's it for?
Your resume is you got a great resume there, but that's just something I feel like we can start off with today, which is fun.
Yeah, for sure. So the Guinness World Record, what do you want to know?
What's it for?
A gymnastics exercise called a muscle up. Have you heard of a muscle up?
Like a chin up?
Yeah, chin up on steroids. It's on the rings, so the gymnastics rings.
Oh, yes.
So you're hanging down under the rings and you pull yourself and then push yourself up above the rings. So you finish hanging and then you start hanging and you finish above the rings. And it was 24 hours, as many of them as possible.
Wow. How many did you do?
The certificate's just there. 1,025.
That's so cool. I've always wanted to do a Guinness World Record. I actually helped some school kids do one. They didn't beat the record, but the process of doing it was quite fun because they were all in primary school and they had to walk 1 meter and there was 1,000 kids. We had to beat like 1,000. They had to walk a couple of meters with a book on their head, like balancing on their head, and they had to walk all simultaneously, but like in a group. And you can imagine trying to facilitate that, the logistics.
Carnage.
Yeah. So it was fun, but very insightful. So one thing I love to start every episode with is kind of going back to the beginning. And one thing that you mentioned to me earlier is that you went through what felt like an existential crisis. So I'd love for you to take us back to that moment and, what was life like leading up to that?
I have been really successful in my life by everyday standards. So even playing football as a kid, it was clear that I excelled compared to some of the other kids. And there was lots of write-ups in the newspapers, and I got player of the year at my club almost every year in a row, except for when my friend's dad was our coach and he just didn't want to give it to me, and I always tease him about that. So I had a lot of success there. I played football for New Zealand, the New Zealand Development Academy. And then the year I failed to make the academy, it's like my dreams got shattered a little bit. Not a little bit. They did. They got shattered. And I rang my coach and I said, what can I do about it? I really want to play professional football. That's my path. And he just said, you're too small. I used to weigh about 45 kilos when I was playing football. I was a really, really tiny kid. So that shattered me. And I was at mid-teens. I turned to like drugs and alcohol. I gave up on it. And I sort of gave up on myself in a way. And I went down that path. 3 or 4 years into that, we got really into the drugs, smoking methamphetamine. Like, it got bad. And one of my friends killed himself. And I sort of realized that the path I was on it was a really bad future. And so I was talking to my dad one night on the phone, and I was high. I'd been smoking marijuana. And I remember talking to my dad. He lives in England, and he's a gentleman. He's just such a well-moraled man and well-principled. And I just saw the contrast between me and him, and I really looked up to him. And I knew I had to do something about my life. I said to myself, I'm making this story much longer than it needs to be, but I said to myself, I'm going to do something with my life because this is not okay. The next day, coincidence, met a friend. He was joining the army. I decided that's my ticket out of here. So I joined the army, and I sort of got my mojo back. I was in an environment where I could be successful again. There were standards. It was quite competitive. I was a competitive person. And so I saw a lot of success through the military as well. I finished my career. I was top student as a physical training instructor. So I went through as a soldier, got deployed to East Timor, did 7 months there. I was in the reconnaissance sniper platoon, which is pretty advanced. But then I went to become a fitness instructor. I topped that course and got posted to the Special Forces camp. So that's where I finished my career training the Special Forces. And so again, I started to realize that I could succeed. Success was a bit of a theme. I left the military and went into bodybuilding. In my first year of bodybuilding, I won New Zealand National Bodybuilding Championships. And then I moved to CrossFit. I opened a few CrossFit gyms, and I competed sort of top 1% in the world as a CrossFit athlete. But this is when it started to fall apart, because I started to feel empty with the success. I was just overly competitive in everything I did, and that started to affect my relationships, specifically a romantic relationship. That relationship toppled me, both of I'm not going to blame anyone, but that I ended up in hospital after that relationship because it was just quite abusive in a way. And after that experience, I was really lost and confused because all of the success hadn't made me happy. I'd gone into this relationship and tried to be over compassionate because I'd realized in the past that being competitive wasn't a good way to relate with people. So I started to be compassionate, and I felt taken advantage of in a really big way. I lost all my money. So at this stage, I owned real estate. I was fit and healthy. I was a competitive athlete. My life looked really on track. I actually won New Zealand's top bachelor, and I was on the magazine covers and things. And then this relationship, it sort of destroyed my self-worth. It destroyed everything. And I found myself in a real hole. I came out of hospital. I was in hospital for about a month, and I'd lost 10 kilos. I was ghost white. I had warts growing all over my body. My self-esteem was through the floor. And I just didn't know who I was. That was the only way I could put it. It was like I was drunk. It was like I was completely drunk, incoherent, didn't know how to act socially. I was afraid of being told off. Everything was just not me. And so that's when I decided, I know, fitness and success, that's one area of life that I can do. So that's when I said, okay, I'll do the Guinness World Record. I did the Guinness World Record, and then I still felt empty afterwards. I just felt broken, completely broken as a man. We can often tie our worth to our wealth, and I'd lost all of that. So I was just a mess. That's when I started to look into coaching as a different route for my career path forward. I moved into coaching, and that same personality grabbed hold of coaching. I was like, I'll be successful. I'll just be the best coach in the world, and everyone will love me. So I started coaching, and it grew really quickly, and I started making good money again. I started speaking, like public speaking, to large audiences, thousands of people, with really well-known people, Deepak Chopra, Tony Robbins. And this exact same pattern happened again. I was like, I'm not fulfilled. There's something inside me that's just empty. And I was reading a lot of books about spirituality at this time, and about the ego, the personality, the soul, finding yourself. And I made the choice to retract from everything I was doing because it wasn't working, but I was faced with a completely unknown future, and that was petrifying. So that's when all of it was a bit of a crisis since that relationship. But when I made the decision to go away from the world, turn off social media, and just figure out who the hell John is, that's when the existential crisis really kicked in, because without my mask or persona of needing to be successful, needing to be validated, who was I without all of the achievements? Who was I really beneath all of that? And that's when depression came, suicidal thoughts, regularly having nightmares, panic attacks. And that went for about 3 years. I mean, that's when that's when my life became beautiful, was during that period. But the existential crisis itself was really debilitating.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It definitely sounds like your journey has been a lot of success, but then that seems to have been the pressure. I also relate to that high achieving and always wanting something more to do and be better. And it's so easy for us, I think, to lose ourselves when we're constantly trying to grow and build up to something. Now with your coaching, something I thought that was really cool I read on your website was the emotion map, the map of emotion, which you've trademarked, which I think is amazing. So do you want to walk us through that a little bit? Because I really love how you share about like authenticity, and we'll talk about your book as well, which is another great topic. With the map of emotion, I'd love for you to break it down for us so the audience can really understand it a little bit more and, make it a bit easier for them to understand where it steps in.
Yeah, I would love to share. So during that 3-year existential crisis, dark night of the soul, I wanted to figure out who I was, but there wasn't much out there that was tangible. It was, get to know yourself, just be yourself, follow your values. I was so confused. I didn't know what any of that meant. So I started researching psychology, philosophy, and theology. They were the big 3 things I wanted to dive into. And during that time, people had ideas about, like, because I was experiencing such horrific emotions, highs and lows. It was sort of like I was being put through a washing machine of emotion. And I went to see some specialists during this time, even as a coach, and I knew a lot and I read a lot and I was well read. I went to see specialists and they had not been through what I was going through. And so they couldn't help me. Bless them. They tried. Some people I paid a fair chunk of money to and they really tried, but they couldn't comprehend my experience. And so that's when I realized I had to do it alone. Started meditating a lot. And I mean, hours and hours and hours a day.
Wow.
And yeah, I stopped working, just went into full hermit retreat mode. And during that time, I created, which is what's become my book, a framework for us to be able to understand ourselves, understand our emotions, understand what drives us, who we are. And the map of emotion sits at the center of that, because really our whole life is a series of patterns. That's it. We have thoughts that lead to feelings, that lead to actions, that lead to outcomes. Once we have the outcome, we either think it's a positive or negative outcome. We'll have another set of thoughts, another set of feelings, take action. And we're constantly going through these cycles of patterns with our relationships, with our finances, with our work. We're just going through these cycles. The map of emotion is the second aspect of the pattern model. I call it a pattern model: thought, feeling, action, outcome. The second aspect is the feeling. And within our feelings, the map of emotion is our emotions encompass our whole life. What I mean by that is, if we know what emotion we're feeling, then we know what thought we're feeling, because our thoughts and feelings are linked, right? So if we know what emotion we're feeling, I can know what someone's thinking. And if I know what someone's thinking and feeling, I can tell you what they're going to do next. And so the map of emotion is the centerpiece of my work and really my life. I live based off it because I believe that all of us have the truth inside of us, and whatever you want to define the divinity, some people say God, there is a truth inside of us, and the map of emotion is a way of finding that truth within us. And so if you don't mind, I can share, what is it? What is this map of emotion?
Yes.
Is that something cool? So there are 8 primary emotions within the map of emotion, and there are 4 pairs. So there are 8 emotions, but they're paired up, and each pair comes a positive and negative emotion. So for example, we have fear and excitement. Fear and excitement are whenever we're imagining something in the future. It's called the future vector. So if there's a negative something in the future, we're going to have fear. If there's a positive something in the future, we're going to have excitement. So they're our 2 driving emotions. They're like our fuel source to go after the things we want and avoid the things we don't want. So they're the first two emotions. The next 2 are pride and shame. And we experience pride and shame when we're judging ourselves. So fear and excitement are when we're judging the future. Pride and shame are when we're judging ourselves. So again, positive is pride, negative is shame. So that's the future vector and the self vector. I call it a vector, as in a vector is like a direction of judgment. Where are we judging? We're judging ourselves, we're judging our future. And then we've got when we're judging the present, there is 2 more emotions, which is, I call it rage and relief, but anger and relief. And so relief is the positive emotion that we feel when we avoid pain, or when something in our environment has gone the way we want it, we can feel relieved. And there's also another set of opposite emotions in the present, which is happy and sad, essentially. So I'll go over them again. When we're judging the future, fear and excitement. When we're judging ourselves, pride and shame. When we're judging the present moment, is our life the way we want it or not? If it's not the way we want it, we're either going to be sad or angry. If it is going the way we want it, we're either going to be happy or relieved. And there are certain mechanics at play with our thinking that create, well, why would someone be sad versus being angry? Like, what's the difference? And I don't know how well versed you are with masculine and feminine energy, but essentially sadness is passive or feminine anger, really. It's the same thing. You're not happy with your environment. There's something missing. And anger is masculine or active. So that's the difference between the two. Now, emotions like depression, anxiety, they're all gradations, so different degrees of those same 8. So if we're talking about happy and sad, if we take that out to the extreme, it's depression and elation. So if we're really elated, really happy, that's the positive polarity to depression, really down, really sad. And so understanding the map of emotion, we can tell, because most people won't know what thoughts are creating their feelings. They're just feeling a certain way. And a lot of people aren't even aware of how they're feeling.
Yes,
I've heard people say to me, like, oh, no, I don't get sad or I don't get depressed. They do. Everybody does to different degrees. It's part of our human nature to be that way. And so by understanding how we feel, then we can know what thoughts are creating it. And so depression, I was depressed for years in a really bad way. My dad kept emailing me saying, go and see a doctor and your mindset stuff doesn't work. And I said, thank you, Dad, bless you, I'm going to carry on. But really, even depression itself is just their reality's not going the way they want it. It's that simple. They've got an expectation of how things should be, and it's not that way. And the gap between what they expect and what is, however big that gap is, that's the gap of depression. And so the whole system gave me an understanding for my own psychology. Because I was a mess, I'm like, why am I depressed? Why am I anxiety? Why do I go into a relationship and feel like I need to prove myself? It answered all of those questions by understanding the map of emotion. And then I spent 18 months, like I said, meditating and looking at every single thought that went through my head that was creating these feelings, and just questioned them all. Really went through and questioned them all until I want to say I regained control of my mind. Or I wouldn't even say regained. I went far deeper than I'd ever gone before into my own psychology and soul. And it gave me a unique perspective of actually who I was. And all of the thoughts that had been driving my life up until that point, I essentially was able to have a higher perspective and take control of them. So yeah, it was the map of emotion is the centerpiece of, and it's not for me anymore. It's for other people to be able to go figure themselves out and see what's driving them and take control of their mind and emotions.
They're very powerful. I love just how you explain that as well, because with our emotions, it does take the work to be able to understand it. It's not that we just switch on. And like you mentioned, a lot of people don't know what they're feeling or that it actually links together. I think a big thing too with the current times is like most of us don't have time to stop unless you're doing the work and you understand it and, you're in that space of healing. And again, with healing, I'm always like, it's lifelong. I learn new things every day. And that's something that I'm excited about, is to have that growth mindset and continuously learn and heal different parts of me or learn new things about myself. But I think with someone that's really starting their journey is a lot of people, they don't have time to feel. Do you ever find that? Like, life's busy.
Yeah, I think there's two things. I mean, I agree 100%.
Yeah. Well, they don't want to as well.
That's the other thing. And we're never trained to. There are very few parents are going to teach their kids how to feel their emotions. I was a soldier for 7 years. Not once did I even consider feeling my emotions. It wasn't until I'd been coaching for maybe a year that I started to comprehend the profundity of emotions. And I went to this energy healing thing. It wasn't my thing at all. I was sort of turned off by it, but there were 9 people there, and 3 people went first. Then I was in the second group of 3, and then another group of 3 went through, and I thought it was just nonsense. And I was lying on the table and people were wriggling around. I thought, this is just stupid. And I was getting angry at myself for coming to this event. I was like, oh, this is just so not me. And I had all this anger and rage in me. And the lady running the healing session said, John, you've got all this anger in your back. And she's like, I can see it. You just need to let it out. And I then got angry at her for I was like, well, this is your fault anyway for doing this, stupid thing. And then I started to feel ashamed because I was too scared to let it out. And anyway, the fury just built inside of me, and I eventually let it out. And it was just this this anger that I'd never felt before came out of my body, and this wave of energy just flew out. And the people sitting on the ground, so after you'd finished your turn, you went and sat back down and watched the next group go through. They all said, after that anger came out of me, it was like my soul was screaming. The whole room was just dead silent. It was just silence. And afterwards, they all said there was just this, like a sonic boom of energy coming out. And after that point, I realized that we just bury so much emotion within us. And so my practice then started to become, I went through like a tantra training course, and that was very much about feeling your emotions every single morning. Like, where are you at emotionally? And a lot of people might see that as woo-woo or spiritual. Like, this is everyday stuff to empower your life now. If you don't know what your emotions are doing, then your unconscious mind is controlling you. You're literally an automaton reacting to the world. It's not until you are in a neutral emotional state that your higher mind comes online, your prefrontal cortex starts to activate, and then you can actually make rational decisions. If that isn't happening and your emotions are there and you don't even know they're there. I didn't know they're there for like 35 years, right? Most people just don't know they're there. You're not in control of your life. You're running on a subconscious program. And true authenticity, which, as you know, is the name of my book, is getting beyond that, getting beyond the programming. And if you're not willing or you're not able to look at your emotions, then it's just not possible. Your future will look like your past.
Yes, and it's just like kind of just continuously coasting through life. And I look at emotions now, and if I feel something, I often find that I will step back, and it's like I don't react. It's like analyze myself, and it's sometimes hard to explain, but I know you understand. If it's somebody, the way that they're treating me, or someone has said something to me, instead of reacting straight away, I'll be like, well, where's this coming from? And that's obviously one example. I think with emotions as well is like with sadness, and knowing when I do start to feel that certain way or get that way, it's like when you really need to listen to yourself and think, what am I doing? Where can I change this? So yeah, very, very powerful emotions. But again, it's not talked about enough unless you're doing the work. And as you mentioned, I think with children that are like the next generation, parents are different, which I think is really cool, because it's like the new age parents. I don't know if you have kids. I don't have kids, but it's cool to see, because I feel like now once I do have kids, it's going to be very different to the way that I was brought up. And it's kind of exciting too, in a way that there'll be less trauma, I think, in certain things, and building stronger beliefs and understanding that children really do, from 1 to 7, that's when we identify as our core beliefs, knowing that you can change them at any time. And that's what I've done at a later stage in life. So I'd love to talk more about your book. What made you want to write your book? Where did that start?
Book, it was, I wrote the book for me. So the two questions on my mind during my existential crisis was, who am I?
Yes.
First one. And if you've ever seriously asked that question, it's a head fuck. Nobody can answer it. It's unanswerable. You can't do it. A philosopher will say one thing, a psychologist will say another, scientists don't know who we are, and they're doing all the testing. There's no answer. You just have to, it has to be an experience. So that was the first question, who am I? Because I explored it all by reading, and there was no answer. So that was the first question on my mind. The second one is, what is the purpose of life? Not my life, but life in general, because I'm quite a big thinker and a deep thinker, and I thought, what's the purpose of all of this?
Yes.
And I've traveled quite a lot of the world. I did it quite young. I sold my first house. I was in the army. I bought a house, hated looking after it, sold it, made all this money, and took a year out of the army and traveled around the world. I just did so much at a young age. I got to the point where like I said, I was empty. And so I got thinking, why are humans on Earth? Why does even Earth and the planets, the solar system, and why does it exist? And so that was part of the existential crisis. And so I started to research. I researched, and then I would just write what I was researching. But it was not for anyone else. It was for me to go, I want to make sense of my life in the world so that I can live in a congruent way without turning mental. Because there was part of me, I thought I was going crazy when my emotions were, and a lot of people will not be able to comprehend this, so it's hard to talk about it, but it's as if I was drunk some days. The emotion, the anxiety was so strong, it almost made my vision blurry, my mind, I couldn't think. It was just this wild experience. And then to feel so depressed that I just wanted to jump off of the roof of a building, because the suicide came when I couldn't find a way out. So it was like, life sucked. Okay, you can sort of deal with that. But when it felt like there was no way out, that's when it's like, well, why keep living? So I started just writing and journaling and drawing pictures. I love pictures, and they turned into the frameworks in my book. That journaling, everything I learned, once I'd come out the other side of it and put myself back together again, I just had all of this information and thought people could really benefit from this. And that's when I decided to make it digestible. So it was the first rendition, the first copy, I don't know if rendition is the right word, the first copy of the book, draft, was 200,000 words. It was just under. And it was like a philosophical discord on life, but way too deep for most people. And so I just started refining it. It's now down to about 42,000 words. It's really digestible, and it sticks to the single most key important theme for a person to live an inspiring life, for a person to empower themselves. So I took all the philosophy out, I took all of the why out, I took all of the counter arguments out, and I'm just giving the what I believe to be the methodology and the pathway for living an inspiring life, creating change in your life, and living a life that's really meaningful. So that's where the book came from. It came from my own pain, converted into something that can help thousands of people. And I know it will. I'm really looking forward to publishing it.
Wow, that's really inspiring because there's so much behind it as well. So when does it come out?
It's a good question. So I'm going through a rewrite now. I just had 6 people go through and read it, and I've taken their feedback on board, and I'm going through a rewrite. This is the 14th rewrite. Mm-hmm. So not like little change, yeah. And so I reckon about 3 or 4 weeks I'll have this rewrite done, just so people know it's the end of August now. And then it goes for a professional critique. There's a guy in America who critiques it professionally. He's already done one professional critique about 8 months ago. And then once his critique comes back in, I don't think there's going to be much to change. Like it's getting quite polished now. I'm really happy with it. After that comes back, I make any changes. Then he edits it, and that takes about 4 more weeks. And then I can publish. So we're looking at the end of this year, approximately.
Hey, well, that's still close. Not far away. And, sounds like a lot of hard work's gone into it. But nothing worth, having or learning from comes easy. So that's really, really, really exciting. What's next for you now? What are your plans? Obviously, you're refining the book.
Done. Once that's ready, more podcasts like this. I'm so grateful for you, because this is just the start. I'm just going to get out there. I haven't been on social media for really about 2.5, 3 years. So kick all that off again. And I want to start running events. Not sure when they'll start. We'll do a book launch event, we're thinking, and then back into events and taking people through this work. That's what I'm going to spend the rest of my life doing. So it's all just starting to churn. I was saying to my wife this morning and my mum actually, we picked her up from the airport, that life's about to change. And what I mean by that is I've just spent 3 years writing a book, which I don't know if anyone can comprehend. Full-time writing, not working, nothing, just writing.
Wow, yes. I've written essays before, uni and stuff, and that's hard, so I can imagine 3 years.
Yeah, I'm ready for a change. Yeah, we're going to really switch it up and get back online again, get back speaking at events, and get back onto podcasts and start sharing the message, sharing the map of emotion, sharing the tools. I'm really looking forward to it.
That's really exciting. That's when I, had a look at what you're doing and stuff, and I was excited to have you on. So thank you, because I can already see you're a wealth of knowledge. But something I really pride in with my guests is they're the people that have been through it, and then they come out the side, they've got a bigger picture for life, and their purpose is now sharing that. And I think that's really, really amazing what you're doing. So what are your thoughts on a lot of my guests? I have questions and stuff about like boundaries. A lot of them are kind of at the start of their journey. So I'd like to, give them some like kind of key takeaways or tips. But one thing I find, and it's a topic I hear a lot, is like setting boundaries can be quite hard at the start to begin the kind of journey of understanding who we are. What are your thoughts on boundaries, or any tips that you've got if it comes to setting boundaries? Because they're not easy, and it's, awkward, but we need to be uncomfortable to make growth.
We do. And boundaries are a huge thing. And I get asked very similar questions. For most people asking about boundaries, they're the ones that are, so everything in life is a balance between 2 opposing forces, right? We can call it yin and yang. We can call it a positive, negative. We can call it masculine, feminine. And those 2 forces act very differently. So someone who struggles to set boundaries is going to be in the feminine side of things. And they're probably going to be someone who people pleases a little bit as well.
Yes.
So they're an overgiver, they're altruistic. And what's really driving that is fear. Fear of not being accepted, fear of losing connection, a fear of being alone. And so I can give some tips and tricks, which will be maybe a little bit more superficial. But then there's the deeper work of what is it that is why are you scared? Why are you scared of conflict? Why are you scared of confrontation? Why are you scared of being alone? Why do you feel the need to be accepted? How long's that been going on for? What was the initial starting point of that? But when it comes to boundaries, the other question a lot of people I have found say is what's the difference between setting a boundary and almost like cutting someone off or blocking your emotions? And this is the beautiful balancing point between the two forces. So my advice for anyone learning to set a boundary is, first off, if you don't set boundaries, you're going to get trampled on for the foreseeable future. And that can be from something small, like, not going to the restaurant you want to go to for dinner, right the way through to losing everything you have. If you go into you're in a marriage situation, you have kids and you can't set a boundary, you're going to start resenting your life because everyone has preferences. They have a value system, and your boundaries are what needs to be in place for you to be able to live in alignment with your value system, the things you want. Now, in any relationship, there are two people, and both of those people have different values. And so the masculine one will usually be the dominant one, the leader, and usually their values get projected into the relationship. At the extreme level, it's my way or the highway, right? That's at the extreme. But the closer we come to the median point is a healthy relationship is going to be a balance. You are going to have one person slightly leading, but ultimately you want a joint vision for your relationship. And that joint vision needs to incorporate both people's values. So if you're the underdog or you're that feminine energy, you have to be ready for conflict. And to you, it's going to feel scary as hell. But for someone who's more dominant, that's just normal. It's like, well, this is what I want in my life, so this is what we're going to do. But it's a balancing act of give and take. And I'm going to say something which many people might find controversial, but it's also a game of power. Okay, so all relationships come down to a game of power. Who's the most empowered? If someone they've got all the money, they've got all the knowledge, they've got all of the, they're on a mission. If they're more empowered, then they're not going to fear your loss because they'll just find someone else, right? But if you don't have much going for you, you're going to fear the loss of the powerful one. So the key to being able to set the boundary is become more powerful, become more empowered. And then you can negotiate, because it's a boundary is a negotiation. It's, hey, I get that you want to do that, but I want to do this. Let's meet in the middle. Now, if you're not empowered, if you're the underdog and you're really not empowered, the other person's just going to go, no, we're not doing that. We're doing what I want. So the more empowered you become, the more you're going to be able to go, actually, no. And so find out what you offer the relationship, essentially. And that's your bargaining tool. And it's negotiation. My wife and I are the same. We're negotiating, the simple things like where we're going to go for dinner. But also right now we're living in New Zealand. We want to live in the Gold Coast. She wants to be there now. I've got a longer term plan. So there's this negotiation going on. And I'm doing everything I can to obviously make her happy, which is to allow her to live within her values, the things she wants. So she's got leverage as well. So she's got her bargaining tools. She supports me, to the end of the earth. So that's her. That's what she contributes. So to set a boundary, one, be ready for conflict, know your worth, and use it as leverage. And don't be scared of losing someone that isn't supporting you. If you're in a position where it's really not great, it's that fear of loss that keeps someone scared to set a boundary. And test the waters. So test it. Ask for more than you normally ask. See what the response is. You'll probably have a bit of fear and anxiety. But unless you test that water of asking for more, then it can be tricky. So I would say, to summarize that, work through the fear of loss. Because that's the biggest thing. You're scared of losing the empowered person from your life, the more empowered person.
That's a perfect way to explain it. I love that. I think as well, when it comes to boundaries, like you're saying with the fear of loss, it's that's what stops people from doing it. And also not even understanding kind of what boundaries they want to set. So I always say to come back and look at areas of your life, whether it's, like relationships, which is always the main one, because whether it could be partner or family, it's really seeing like what's wrong, like what's draining you in certain areas, and having the comfortability to be able to approach someone it can be in a way as well. For me, for setting my boundaries, what I've learned, it's always just been expressing authentically like how I feel and things, the reasons why. And if they don't respect that, like, you're a human being as well and it's your life. And especially I think what was important that you said is like, don't be afraid to lose someone. Like, it might be scary as well, but if they're not respecting you and they're not putting, you first or valuing you, then you deserve someone better. But I always find that's always a hot topic is boundaries, because it's uncomfortable. And most of the time we grow up, I think generation now is a little bit different. We are a bit more of disruptors. I think we speak more. We're happy to have conflict, but I know with the older generation, like they didn't really have much conflict. They kind of just got on with things. And now it's like a whole different turn where we want to know more about ourselves. We have that awareness, that self-awareness. We know that we need to understand more about who we are and what we do to make sure that we live the best that we can every day. So yeah, boundaries is always such a fun topic. And then I love talking about like the subconscious mind as well. What's your thoughts on the subconscious? Because it's so powerful. And I think this can be even as simple as when I talk about journaling. Journaling's easy to start with, writing your thoughts and your feelings, but also writing in a future positive term as well.
Yeah. So the last thing I'll say on boundaries is if you struggle to set boundaries, empower yourself. Like that's the underlying theme, because you're not going to be able to negotiate or demand something if you've got nothing to offer.
Yep.
So that just turns into you're a bit crazy if you're trying to demand more than you actually offer. So if you got to offer something to the relationship, and then you've got the right to sort of set that bound. But the unconscious mind, I mean, that drives everything, really. I believe the purpose of our human life is to become conscious. That's I could summarize that, because nothing outside of us is going to fulfill us. It's those things are transient, but something that can never be taken away from us is our wisdom. And wisdom is really how aware and conscious we become in this lifetime. And that can never be taken from us. So for anyone listening, the unconscious mind is essentially everything that goes on in your mind that you don't know is going on. When I was learning hypnotherapy, I'm trained in hypnotherapy, they would say about 95% of your life is run unconsciously. You don't know what's going on. I'm going to argue and say it's way more than that. It's like 99.9%.
Wow.
There's so much happening within us that we don't know. And I really learned that when I went through my years of meditation, because if you ask someone just to sit with their eyes closed, put a alarm on their phone for 10 minutes and just sit and watch what goes on in their head and their body, and if they get agitated. Now that's just 10 minutes of your day. And there's a lot happening. Now you expand that over a 24-hour period. Maybe you're sleeping for a bit of that, but the mind's still ticking away. Dreams are all unconscious, subconscious things to pay attention to. It's running our life. Every action and reaction every reaction we have in life, whether it's something small, how we have our coffee, for example, that has probably become an unconscious pattern for someone. And it started because a time in the past you had a pleasurable experience with that type of coffee. And that usually started by someone suggesting it to you. So an outside influence projected what they like onto you. You tasted it. There was a sense of pleasure. You then embodied that into your nervous system, and then you just replicate it over and over again in the future. The language we speak, this is how crazy it gets. If you really look at who you are as a person, your entire belief system, your personality, all of it is relatively unconscious. You picked it up in the womb when your parents were arguing, right? And you were in the womb, you picked stuff up.
Yes, yep.
There's a book by Dr. Arthur Janov called The Primal Scream, and he talks a lot about birth trauma. He's like, the process of being born into the world is traumatic. For a baby, you're in this nice, warm, comfy womb, and then you come flying out into this bright light. There's blood, there's placentas, there's lights in your face, and it's a really traumatic experience. And then all of your unconscious mind is being imprinted. Your brain is in this, it's like a sponge. It's in what's known as a delta brainwave at the start. And then it goes through a theta brainwave. And during these brainwaves, you're not aware, right? Not many people can remember being 2-3 years old. And so your brain is just full sponge mode, absorb everything. And we learn what is right and wrong, what is good and bad, what is true and false. And a lot of it's incorrect. It's not true. And our whole lives then become a lie. And I'll give you an example. A lot of people believe Santa Claus is real for the first number of years of their life, and they believe it. They believe it so strongly that they're willing to fight for that belief. And then you learn, wait, Santa Claus isn't real. And how could you believe with so much conviction that Santa Claus was real? And it's because you were lied to. You were literally lied to. And then so you've got to ask the question, well, what else have I been lied to about? And when you start to explore the way you're living your life, I don't mean to sort of tear anyone down, but have you actually examined where all of your beliefs come from? The career you're in, your financial situation right now is an unconscious pattern. However
Yes.
much money you have, it is an unconscious pattern. The quality of your relationship, it's an unconscious pattern. Your health, your physical health, that is an unconscious pattern. And all of it can be, let's call it, changed, rewired, transformed. But in order for that to happen, you have to explore, you have to examine your mind. Journaling, like you said, is brilliant. Socrates is a Greek philosopher, and he said the unexamined life is not worth living because you're just a robot to everything
I love
that's
that. I've
been
read a few of his
programmed
books.
into you.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, no, you keep going. Sorry, I was just talking about Socrates.
Yeah, so there are layers to your unconscious. Setting boundaries, so that is a prime example. Someone might have listened to this podcast and go, oh my God, the reason don't set boundaries is because I fear losing them. And that might be a light bulb moment for someone.
So powerful.
Right? So they just became conscious of an unconscious program. Now that's just one tiny little aspect of their whole entire life. If you look at the way they react to people in the workplace, if you, like I said, look at their bank account, their spending habits, all of it has been programmed into them and they don't even know. And it can all be transformed and changed. And so something that sits at the center of my work is in between fear and excitement, in between all of your emotions, when you're in your center point, that is the only moment in time where that's when you're fully conscious. And that's the only moment in time when you actually have an opportunity to transform your life. Otherwise, your pains from the future are going to be your pains from the past are going to become your fears of the future. And your pleasures from the past are going to become the excitement in the future. And you're living in the past and future. You're never present. And the past is eternal. The future is eternal. It just goes on forever. So you can't transform until you get present now, become aware, and choose a different action. It's the only time in existence where you can make a change in your life.
Wow, so powerful. Such a wealth of knowledge. There's so many key takeaways. The guests are going to love this episode because the way that you're explaining everything as well is, I love it's more like a philosophy. What am I thinking? That word I'm thinking of.
Philosophical.
I've done a few episodes today, so my brain's a bit getting to the end of it. Probably should have had another coffee. But then also understandable. And I think that's what's really important when people want to learn and understand is that there's so much information out there that it can be hard to cipher and see what's real and see what's authentic and people that really care or people that really, really understand. But I think that you touched on so many really important things with the values and the beliefs, and we could go our whole lives and not notice any of them, but are we really living our most aligned life? And it took me years to really dig deep and go underneath and have a look at why do I think this way? Why are my relationships like this? And then it went back from my parents, my relationship my parents had, and things that I was taught to believe. But then it goes back generations, and I've learnt more things now about speaking with my nonna about things that she went through. She was born the year of the war in Italy in World War II. She was born early because she thought her dad was going to have to go fight with the Germans, and he was older, so he didn't have to go. But even understanding that, I think was really interesting what you mentioned about the womb. And not many people talk about that, but I've read some stuff on that as well. And it's even the arguments and stuff, like you said, it's really all stems from them. Or if there's music and peace and then you're born into the world. And I thought that was interesting as well about the birth being traumatic, because there's a lot of links. I'm doing a course on neuroscience because I just love the brain and I want to learn more about it to be able to, add more value and more interest into the podcast, because I do a lot of research on my own. And one thing I found quite interesting is mental disorders like OCD and ADHD. A lot of it can be linked to traumatic births. And then, there's obviously some type of gene and that there as well. But now they're doing research on that to think of the environment's been fine, what happened, and they link it to a traumatic birth. So I thought that was really cool that you touched on that. Because it is quite scary, isn't it? To think we're just in this womb and then the lights and everything that we come out to. Or also I think as well is some babies get taken away from the mother. And that can be links to things now. Yeah, I could talk about this stuff for hours. I love it.
Yeah, well, I'm really, I appreciate hearing that you've pulled apart your own life a little bit. I really like that quote from Socrates, the unexamined life is not worth living. Another quote from the Greek era as well is know thyself, which is a really common one. And until we can know ourselves, then we're really lost in the world.
Mm.
You said it's scary that we come out for that traumatic birth. What I think is the scariest thought is that we're not actually in control of our lives.
Yeah.
That's what's scary. Because if we are just playing a set of patterns from our past that we didn't choose, right? We didn't choose to experience those experiences. And now our life is a reflection of that. If that doesn't petrify someone, then I don't know what does. But I thought about that and I thought, well, if how far back can you go? It's called an infinite regress when you just keep going back because, well, who did your parents learn from? Because they taught you. Who did they learn from? Their parents. Who did they learn? And it just goes all the way back to whatever your beliefs are, the Big Bang, God, Adam and Eve, whatever you want to call it. You just go all the way back. And so that cycle of cause and effect, it's called, every effect comes from a prior cause and it just goes all the way back. So to break that sequence of cause and effect, that's where I use meditation. That's where meditation breaks the sequence of cause and effect, because that's the only sort of, I don't want to say the only way, that's what I believe is the most powerful way to step out of the cycle of cause and effect, the cycle of doing, so you can actually objectively reason about why you're doing what you're doing and make a change. I had a friend who said to me, he's like, I'm choosing everything in my life. And I said, okay, what are you doing this weekend? He said, I'm going to go watch a football game. And I said, what team are you going to go watch? And he told me the team. And I said, why are you watching that team? And I knew what he was going to say. He's like, because they're my favorite. And so I said, when did they become your favorite? I'm going to assume you experienced you've got a positive memory sometime when you were younger. And he goes, yeah, I was watching TV and there was a championship game and they won the championships. And then I said, that's my team. And so I said, okay, if the other team had won, which team would you have chosen? And he goes, yeah, I would have probably gone with the other team. And I said, so your whole entire life you've been going to watch this one football team and you only watch them because they won that one game. I was like, if they hadn't have won that one game, it's the butterfly effect, right? If they hadn't have won that one game, your whole life would have been different because you would have maybe supported another team. And so I use that as a bit of a story because he's not living the most fulfilling life right now. I know that for a fact. I've coached him through business problems, through relationship problems, and to think that he was in control of his life. And I just painted that clear example where he wasn't choosing. It's called determinism, when your life is essentially chosen for you based on your prior experiences. And the way to step out of determinism into free will is to understand the cause, the football game, and break that pattern of cause and effect by really reflecting on every single thing you do with a fine-tooth comb and going, I've got 80, 90, 100 years on earth. Is this what I actually want to be doing, or am I just playing a pattern that I picked up along the way? And that decision to take a different path, that's the moment you take control of your life.
I love that. It really helps me. I was thinking a lot then when you were talking, and I'm like a similar kind of situation now, obviously going on van life, going against the grain. Like I left my 10-year career, hotel management. That's what I originally went to uni for, made my way to the top. It showed me that I had to be a type of manager or a person that I just didn't align with. And I could have just sat there and listened and just done what they wanted me to do. But there was something in me that just said, like, no, you were made for more. Like, I made that step. And if I listened to everybody else that wanted to keep me safe, they were just doing the right thing, telling me, oh, no, you can't leave a full-time job. You've got a mortgage. It's like all that stuff, but that's their beliefs. And that was really taking away and thinking like, no, I want to take this risk, because if I don't take the risk, then I don't know what I'll be doing. Like, I'll just be there. And it's not easy to do that. And I had to do some work before then. And that was really in the middle of my journey. And then coming from that, everything else is unfold. So I think when you are able to understand that you can change your beliefs and you don't have to listen to everyone else, and the choices that we make, we need to be scared, I think, in decisions. What I'm trying to explain is if we're scared making a decision, I think that's when we're kind of disrupting that belief. It's not common. It's uncomfortable. I like to make decisions based on risk and knowing that it's what I really want. And now I do it all the time. And
yeah, you're a great example of someone who's reflected, decided, worked through their fears and what's possible. The fact that, you've got a property, I'm assuming you're quite young, and that's fantastic. And now you're about to travel around the country in a van and just go and explore, instead of the potential was for you to be stuck in a I say stuck. Well, you would have hated it, stuck in a hotel chain, and
Yeah,
a lot of people,
stuck.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
If I didn't do that too, if I didn't make that decision, I wouldn't have had my business fully as well, and I wouldn't have gone into that head first. I would have just stayed there, where I was lucky that I was able to still work casually while I built the business. And then there was the whole, COVID stuff. So for me, I had to pivot, and it was using that, very grateful, I can say, in a positive way, to be able to have my business. And I wouldn't be doing van life if I didn't make that decision. And it's like that flow on effect. And all I've ever wanted to do, and why I got into hotel and tourism to study that, is because I love to travel. But I only got to travel 4 weeks of the year. So it was a bit of a moment where I loved it. It was fun to talk to people all the time, and, good hotel discounts, but it wasn't really aligned with what I want, which was to be able to travel full time and to be able to work on the road. So yeah, that's my interesting background, a little bit of my background. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. That means a lot, because it's not been easy, and then it's always about sharing that risk and that journey. And that's why I love to you have to put yourself out there. You have to be uncomfortable. You got to go through it to get to the other side. Then it's beautiful, and you get to experience life differently, and, constantly just learn more about yourself. So before we wrap up today's episode, we've been talking for a while now. I love it. Did you have anything else you wanted to talk about? I usually just end with some wrap up questions, but anything else? Are you doing any conferences or anything yet? Anything booked in? Yeah. No, that's like, yeah. So if you could go back and tell your younger self one thing before you had to kind of embark on that journey, I know you already explained what you've been through. What would you say? What tip would you give yourself before it all started? That's perfect. Do you have any mantras that you live by, or quotes? I feel like you got quotes. Oh, that's perfect. I love that. I always say mine's not as detailed as that, but progress, not perfection. That's something that's really helped me, remove that perfectionist hat. Yeah. It's enabled me to be able to deal with that messy middle and kind of come out the other side, really embrace that, which is fun. It's fun now. I look back, it's exciting. Well, thank you so much for your time today, John. I really appreciate your time. I will link your website in the show notes. On your website, you've got all your links to your socials and stuff on there, so I'll add that in there as well. But really, really appreciate your time. My pleasure. And to everybody else, I will see you next week.